Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we do the heavy lifting for you, taking all those articles, all that data, flooding your feeds, and boiling it down into pure, actionable, competitive knowledge.
And today, we are climbing inside a classic, a really storied piece of hardware.
We're strapping into the venerable, the divisive, and I think the often misunderstood chassis of the Land Raider Crusader.
Yeah, this is a unit that is just steeped in history and expectation. I mean, for decades, the lore has sold this thing as the ultimate line breaker. The vehicle that just smashes through enemy lines, hurricane bolters blazing, assault cannons screaming. It really conjures this image of a true main battle tank, an MBT, just designed for raw aggression.
And that right there, that image, is where we have to perform the crucial reality check. Because the lore, as cool as it is, and, historical context, they just don't win you games in the current meta.
Not anymore, no.
In the, let's be honest, brutal mathematics of Warhammer 40,000 10th edition, the Land Raider Crusader, the LRC, is facing a pretty serious identity crisis.
Oh, absolutely. If you put it on the table expecting it to be a tank killer or even a premier infantry shredder, it fails. The raw stats will disappoint you every time.
It consistently fails the fundamental lethality metrics that you need from any serious gun platform that costs over 200 points.
That's the key. The perception of it being this combat MBT is just not supported by the numbers we're seeing on the board today.
So our mission for this deep dive is a complete tournament realist reconstruction of this thing. We are setting the narrative aside.
Parking the lore completely.
We're using rigorous MathHammer forensics, the latest technical data, and that means the digital points from the Munitorm field manual, nothing else, to just strip away all those old assumptions.
And by doing that, we're going to uncover the LRC's true role.
Exactly. We think we can prove that the Crusader isn't a blunt instrument at all. It's actually a highly specialized, really cost-effective aggressor bus. It's a scalpel, a sophisticated one hidden inside a big, dense, cheap hull.
It's all about redefining its value through the data.
Yeah.
And we're going to break that down into 4 critical phases. First, points calibration, which is all about the economy of the thing.
Then we'll get into its structural resilience, the T12 breakpoint.
Yeah.
After that, weapon verification, which is where we get into some of the hard truths.
The volume trap, yeah. And finally, synergy forensics. That's where we unlock its hidden value, its potential within specific army lists and detachments.
Okay, let's get into it. Let's unpack this dense metal brick, starting with the cold, hard foundation of it all, its cost. Because it doesn't matter how cool a model is, if the points are wrong, it's staying on the shelf.
And we have to set the ground rules right away here. The printed index cards you might have, obsolete. The flowery unit descriptions in the Codex.
Competitive noise.
Total noise. The assumptions from last edition. Even worse, the only thing that matters, the only thing that reflects the true efficiency reality of the current meta is the digital points value in the Munitorm field manual.
If you're using anything else, you're starting the game at a disadvantage.
You're making decisions on outdated intel, plain and simple.
So that economic foundation is what justifies any units slot in a list. So what's the calculus right now? What is the price of admission for the Land Raider Crusader?
Right now, the latest data has the Land Raider Crusader sitting at 220 points.
220.
And that number, that valuation, is probably the single most critical variable in this entire analysis. Because it instantly shoves the LRC over the 200-point premium threshold.
The premium threshold, okay, so for anyone not familiar, that's kind of the psychological line in the sand, right? It's where a unit goes from being an easy, yeah, sure, inclusion, to one that has to fight for its life to justify its slot in a 2,000-point list.
That's a perfect way to put it. Anything over 200 points has to deliver exceptional value. It's not a supporting piece anymore. It has to either guarantee you primary scoring success through some kind of unmatched utility, or
it has to kill things.
It has to provide overwhelming lethality. It needs to be able to reliably remove an equivalent or preferably greater amount of your opponent's points from the board.
And the LRC, just on paper, with its toughness 12, 16 wounds, 2+ save, it at least feels like a premium hull in terms of sheer durability. That's a decent start.
It's a great start, but the real question is its efficiency relative to its peers.
Yeah.
How does that 220 points stack up?
Yeah, let's pull in its direct competition. The sources we looked at highlight a pretty significant price gap here.
A huge one. And this creates what we call the valuation delta.
Yeah.
If you look at the other Land Raiders, the standard variant's a little more. It's at 240 points.
Okay.
But the real heavy hitter, the one that for a long time has been the gold standard, That's the Land Raider Redeemer.
And that one is steeper.
Much steeper. It's 285 points.
Wow, okay, so that's a 65-point delta between the Crusader and the Redeemer. That's not marginal. That is a substantial chunk of your list's budget.
It is huge.
Yeah.
In the cold calculus of building a competitive list, 65 points is absolutely the difference between a finely tuned machine and a list that just feels a bit slow or under-equipped.
What does 65 points actually buy you?
Well, it's enough to get a critical utility unit, a full squad of scouts, for instance, to go score you secondary objectives. Or it's a powerful enhancement, like the target augury web for a tech marine, which we'll get into later.
Or it's two different one-use stratagems over the course of the game. That can be the difference between winning and losing.
For sure. And the Redeemer is widely and rightly considered the superior generalist anti-infantry machine. I mean, those flamers, the Overwatch potential.
So the question you have to ask is, why are tournament players even considering the Crusader? Why risk it when for 65 points more, you get the Redeemer, which provides that core utility like high AP, amazing Overwatch, and just pure board control?
Right. If the Redeemer gives you guaranteed threat saturation, if its weapon output is just structurally better, is the transport capacity of the Crusader really worth losing all that firepower?
And the answer seems to be yes, but only under very specific conditions.
Exactly. And this brings us to what we're calling the Rosetta Stone of the LRC's value. It's the points per transport slot efficiency, the PPTS.
This is the metric that justifies everything else.
It is. The Crusader is defined by its absolutely cavernous transport bay. It has 16 slots.
16, compared to the Redeemer's 14.
And the standard Land Raider's 12. That 2 to 4 slot difference, that is the entire competitive advantage right there.
Okay, so let's run the full efficiency reality calculation for everyone listening. Let's compare the main heavy transport options.
Okay, let's do it. First up, the Land Raider Crusader. 220 points divided by its 16 slot. That comes out to 13.75 points per slot.
13.75. Got it.
Now the Land Raider Redeemer. 285 points, a lot more. Divided by 14 slots. That's 20.35 points per slot.
Ooh, that's a big jump.
It's a massive jump. And for completeness, the standard Land Raider. 240 points for 12 slots, which is 20.00 points per slot, evenly.
So the Crusader is just way, way more efficient if all you care about is moving bodies.
And let's throw in the Repulsor for good measure, the standard one. It's cheaper, 190 points, but it only has 12 slots. That's 15.83 points per slot.
Wow. So the math is undeniable. The Crusader is, what, 32% more efficient per slot than the Redeemer? And it even beats the cheaper Repulsor by almost 14%.
This is the tournament realist conclusion. You have to see the Crusader not as a tank, but as a logistics vehicle. Its competitive value is purely logistical. It is the most economical way in the entire Space Marine arsenal to move a large, high-value asset across the board while keeping it safe.
And the flip side of that is crucial.
It is. If a player puts the LRC in their list and doesn't use those 15th and 16th slots, that critical extra capacity, they are mathematically wasting those 65 points.
They should have just taken the Redeemer for its superior guns.
100%. It's a specialist unit. You take it because you have a specific large unit that must fit inside.
And it's not just efficient capacity, it's durable capacity. Which brings us to the T12 Economy Index.
Right, this is its other secondary role. At 220 points, the Crusader is one of the cheapest ways in the entire game to get a Toughness 12 2+ safe hull onto the table.
And that's a big deal compared to other T12 platforms.
It is. A Repulsor Executioner, for example, which is a genuine tank hunter, has a similar T12 chassis, but it costs a lot more than 220 points. And it doesn't have that 16-slot capacity.
So it creates a resource allocation problem for your opponent. It's an economic anchor.
Exactly. It forces what we call a stat check. If you're playing against an army that relies heavily on mid-tier anti-tank, like S9 Multi-Meltas or S10 Plasma, the Crusader is a disproportionately tough nut to crack for them.
So they have to commit their best guns, the stuff that should be shooting your real threats, into this relatively cheap transport.
Precisely. They have to point their Gladiator Lancers, their Ballistis Dreads, at this 220-point bus. So just by existing as a cheap T12 hull, it successfully messes up your opponent's target priority.
Okay, so the big takeaway from this first section is that the LRC is a budget-friendly logistics platform that also happens to be a massive durable target that's way cheaper than its defensive stats would suggest.
It's an economic gambit. It's designed to soak fire and preserve your true killing power.
And that's a perfect lead-in to our second phase, structural resilience. We need to do a deep dive on what Toughness 12 actually means on the table, not just as a number, but as a statistical barrier.
Yeah, T12 is, I would argue, the most important defensive breakpoint that was established in 10th edition. It creates this chasm in survivability compared to the T9 or D10 vehicles we were used to. The whole game's math for wounding just shifts dramatically at this point.
Let's break that down for everyone. Let's walk through that probability cascade. How does T12 affect the different kinds of incoming fire?
Okay, so first up, small arms. We're talking S3, S4, your standard lasguns, bolters, stuff like that. They now only wound a T12 target on a 6+ inks.
A 6. So statistically, you need 6 times as much fire to get the same number of wounds as you would against a basic infantry model.
Which means the damage is basically negligible. You should just ignore it entirely when you're making your tactical plans. It's not a threat.
Okay, next tier up. Light anti-tank. This is where you said the Melta trap emerges?
It does. This is your S9 multi-Melta, maybe S10 plasma gun. These now only wound a T12 target on a 5+ wing.
A 5+. That's a 33% chance to wound. Let's pause on that because that feels huge.
It is the critical breakpoint. Historically, S9 Melta was your reliable go-to anti-tank. It was wounding older T8, T9 vehicles on 3s or 4s.
Right.
The T12 characteristic has cut the effectiveness of a huge chunk of the game's anti-tank weaponry by 50% compared to what they used to shoot at. Let's put it this way. Against the Redemptor Dreadnought, which is T10, that S9 Melta wounds on a 4+ form.
A coin flip.
A coin flip. Against the Crusader at T12, it's a 5+ form. That 2-point toughness difference effectively halves the damage output of a weapon like that against the Land Raider chassis.
Okay, moving up the ladder to dedicated anti-tank. The classic S12 Lascannon. What's the probability there?
S12 versus T12 is a wound roll of 4+ form.
Another coin flip.
Another coin flip. This is the sweet spot. You need to land something like 13 or 14 successful hits just to generate the average number of wounds you need to take down the LRC's 16 wounds. And that's before we even start talking about saves.
So only the really big guns, the super heavy killers, are reliable.
Right. Only your S16+ stuff wounds reliably on a 3+ chop. T12 just transforms the Crusader into this big statistical wall.
And now we have to combine that T12 with the rest of the stats. 16 wounds and that base 2+ save. We touched on its point per wound efficiency, but let's really re-emphasize this ablative wounds advantage.
Okay, so the Crusader costs 13.75 points per wound. It is just pure efficient bulk. Think about the opportunity cost here. If your opponent allocates an entire anti-tank squad to kill this 220-point Crusader.
They're not shooting at the 285-point Redeemer.
Exactly. Or worse for them, they're not shooting at the 400-point unit of Aggressors that the Crusader is carrying. You force them to commit their most valuable resources, high AP, high-strength shots, into a relatively budget-friendly, highly durable brick.
But every tank, no matter how tough, has a flaw. What's the Achilles heel for the Land Raider Crusader?
It's a big one. It's the lack of a spiritual defense layer. It has no native invulnerable save.
Right.
And that is a massive competitive vulnerability. Extreme AP, we're talking AP4 or better, just punches straight through that beautiful ceramite armor. It makes that fantastic 2+ save functionally irrelevant.
This is where things like heavy plasma cannons or rail guns become absolutely terrifying.
Terrifying. They just instantly degrade your save to a 6+ low,
Yeah.
or you just have no save at all.
So if the defense isn't built in, it has to be activated. How does a smart player mitigate this weakness?
You have to rely entirely on layered defenses and spending your command points. You have to use stratagems, primarily Armor of Contempt, which reduces incoming AP by 1.
Yeah.
Using AOC becomes absolutely mandatory if this tank is going to be exposed to any serious AP fire.
You have to budget 1 CP for this tank every single turn in your opponent's shooting phase.
You do. It's part of the cost of running it.
Okay, let's run the numbers on the Armor of Contempt test to really show everyone why that CP is so worth it. We'll use the classic anti-tank gun, a Lascannon, S12, AP3, damage D6 +1.
Okay, first the baseline. An unprotected Crusader, out in the open, gets hit by that AP3 Lascannon. Its 2+ save is immediately degraded to a 5+ save.
That's only a 33% chance to save. Not great.
Not great at all. Now let's add the first layer, cover.
Simple positioning.
Simple positioning. Cover gives you +1 to your save. So now that AP3 shot is treated as AP2. The Crusader saves on a 4+, a 50% chance. We've already improved the odds significantly.
And now for the final critical layer. We spend the CP for Armor of Contempt.
With AOC layered on top of the cover, the net AP becomes AP1. The Crusader is now saving on a 3+ spec.
A 3+. That's a 66% chance to save every one of those high-power shots.
Let's talk about that in terms of effective health points, or EHP.
Yeah, let's do the EHP comparison against that AP3 fire with and without the layering.
Okay, so without any layering, out in the open with a 5+ save, The Crusader has an EHP multiplier of 1.5. Against its 16 wounds, that gives it 24 effective wounds.
Not bad.
But with cover and AOC, saving on a 3+ day, the EHP multiplier jumps to 3.0. That means against that same Lascannon, the LRC now has 48 effective wounds.
48! You have mathematically tripled its durability just by spending 1 CP and positioning it correctly.
And that's why we say its durability isn't a passive stat. It's an active tactical commitment you have to make as a player.
And because it's cheap at 220 points, if your opponent does manage to focus enough fire to chew through those 48 effective wounds, they've probably still played right into your hands. It's the distraction card effects roll.
The zombie unit roll, yeah.
Yeah.
It's expendable. If it dies, you've only lost 220 points. But if your opponent dedicates, say, 500 points worth of shooting, a couple of Lancer shots, a Redemptor's whole activation into that 220-point target, you have won the resource trade.
You've preserved your real threats, and that lethal cargo is still safe inside until the very last moment.
Yeah.
Okay, we've established its incredible economic and structural value, all coming from that T12 220-point sweet spot. But now we have to confront its greatest weakness, its guns. We are moving into MathHammer forensics, the weapon verification phase, and this is where we have to, I think, formally revoke the Crusader's beloved Tank Hunter title.
Yeah, this part requires us to just ignore the rule of cool completely and focus purely on the statistical output. The Crusader's arsenal, it boasts a massive volume of shots, but it's fundamentally plagued by this lethal combination of low strength and zero native AP.
Let's list that standard competitive loadout again for everyone. You've got 2 Hurricane Bolters on the sponsons, the twin assault cannon on the hull, and then your utility pintle weapons, usually a multi-melta and a 100-killer missile.
Right.
Let's start with the king of volume.
Yeah.
The Hurricane Bolters. We're talking 24 shots at S4, AP 0, damage 1, and it's twin-linked, so you get full wound rerolls.
On paper, that looks amazing, but this is what we call the volume trap.
The volume trap. Why?
Because Strength 4 has suffered a catastrophic competitive devaluation in this edition. With so much T5 elite infantry out there and T12 vehicles becoming common, S4 just doesn't cut it, and the AP0 is the real statistical choke point.
Historically, though, 24 shots of S4 with rerolls would just vaporize infantry squads. Why is that no longer the case?
Because of the 2+ save meta on elite units, right?
Great.
Let's run the simulation. Let's pit it against a really common, tough target. A squad of 5 Terminators. They're T5 with a 2+ save.
Okay, this is a unit a line breaker should absolutely be able to engage.
It should. So 24 shots, hitting on 3s, that gives you an expected 16 hits. Now you're wounding their toughness 5 on a 5+ Fey, which normally isn't great, but you have a full reroll from Twin Link, so you end up forcing about 9 successful wounds.
9 wounds. That still sounds okay.
But here's the statistical disaster. The Terminator saves on a 2+ against AP0. They only fail that save on a roll of a 1.
Oh, so out of those 9 wins you forced,
You get an average of only 1.5 failed saves.
1.5.
Since Terminators have 3 wounds each, that entire storm of 24 shots statistically fails to kill a single Terminator model.
Wow.
The 2+ save just negates 83% of the damage before it even happens. The volume is completely nullified by the target's armor.
And against a truly hard target, like another Land Raider at P12.
It's even worse. Firing 24 shots at T12, you're only wounding on 6s. Even with the reroll, you might force maybe 3 or 4 wounds, and then their 3+ save turns that into maybe 1 point of damage, if you're lucky.
So the Hurricane Bolters are for chaff, and only chaff.
They're purely for chaff sweeping, and that is a very low-value task for a 220-point tank to be performing.
The verdict is clear. The Hurricane Bolters are a psychological weapon, not a lethal one. Okay, next up, the Twin Assault Cannon. This one is interesting because it has the devastating wounds keyword.
Yeah, this fires 6 shots, S6, AP0, damage 1 with dev wounds and twin-linked. The goal here is not standard damage at all. You are fishing for critical wounds. You're just looking for unmodified 6s to hit, which trigger mortal wounds and bypass armor completely.
Strength 6 feels like such an awkward number. It wounds T12 on 6s, T10 on 5s.
Exactly. Its regular damage profile is basically useless. You are relying entirely on the probability of rolling a 6. With only 6 shots, you expect one of them to be a 6. The Twin Links reroll helps a bit, but the volume is just too low.
So what's the average output?
Statistically, it generates, on average, only about 1 mortal wound per shooting phase. It's pure chip damage. It's useful for maybe stripping that last wound off a character or a vehicle, but you can never ever rely on it to actually remove a threat.
Okay, and finally, the multi-melta. The LRC's one piece of dedicated anti-tank. Why did the sources specifically label this the 10th edition trap?
Because the multi-Melta's profile is A2, S9, AP4 damage D6 with Melta 2. The flaw is that Strength 9 completely lost the competitive arms race against T10 and T12 vehicles.
Right. It wounds them on 5s.
It wounds a T9 Rhino on 4s, which is fine, but against the big stuff, it's a 5+ sat. And when you combine that low volume of only 2 shots with a degraded 33% chance to wound, the damage becomes incredibly unreliable and volatile.
Let's test that. Let's fire it at a common tough vehicle, maybe an enemy Gladiator Lancer. T12, 10 wounds.
Okay, 2 shots, hitting on 3s gives you 1.33 hits. Wounding on 5s gives you 0.44 successful wounds.
Less than half a wound on average.
Now, the Melta 2 rule means if you're in half range, you get to add 2 to the damage roll, so an average of 5.5 damage. But you have to multiply that by your 0.44 wounds.
And that comes out to roughly 2.4 damage on average.
Exactly. Even when the Melta is in its perfect optimal position, the result is statistically trivial against any real vehicle. And that high variance D6 damage roll means it could spike and do 7 or 8 damage, or it could do 1. You just can't build a game plan around that. It's not reliable enough to be called a tank hunter.
Okay, let's add it all up. The Hurricane Bolters give you about 1.5 damage against elites. The Assault Cannon gives you 1 mortal wound. The Multi-Melta gives you about 2.5 damage. What is the total sustained damage output of this 220-point line breaker?
The total sustained damage is only around 4 to 5 damage per turn against anything T10 or higher. Even if you fire the one-shot hunter-killer missile, which might add another 4 damage on average, your total alpha strike is still only 7 to 10 damage.
I have to challenge this, though. I mean, historically, the whole reason you brought a Crusader was for this absolute torrent of fire. Are we really saying that competitive players are sacrificing the core function of a tank, the ability to kill things for logistics? Is that trade-off really worth the 65 points you save?
We're saying exactly that. And the answer is yes, it is worth it, but only because its modern role has been completely redefined. The Tank Hunter title is unequivocally revoked.
So what is its offensive role?
Its offensive role is defined entirely as screen clearance. That volume of fire, while it's totally ineffective against elites, is just enough to shred cheap chaff units, guardsmen, cultists, gaunts, to create a charge lane for the lethal cargo that's inside. The LRC doesn't destroy the hard targets. It enables its passengers to destroy the hard targets.
That distinction is absolutely paramount, and it brings us perfectly to Section 4, the primary asset. The Land Raider Crusader is defined by its ability to deliver its payload, specifically the assault ramp ability and the 16-seat puzzle.
This one line of text on its datasheet is the single most valuable feature it has. The assault ramp allows the units inside to get out after the vehicle has made a normal move and still be eligible to declare charge that turn.
That is a tactical game changer. For slow, dedicated melee units, it completely solves their mobility crisis, especially for Gravis armored units.
Let's run the specific threat range extension calculation, because this is why the LRC commands so much respect on the tabletop.
Okay.
The Crusader moves its maximum 12 inches. The unit inside then disembarks up to 3 inches away from the hull. Then, that unit declares a charge, and on 2d6, the average roll is about 7 inches.
So you add those all together, 12-inch move, plus 3-inch disembark, plus a 7-inch charge.
You're looking at a reliable average threat range of 20 to 24 inches up the board, often on turn 1 or turn 2.
And that lets you bypass the entire enemy screen. You can land your high-value, slow melee units directly into your opponent's midfield or even their backline before they even have a chance to react or kite you.
The Crusader is essentially a kinetic energy delivery platform for the true line breakers that it's carrying.
And this incredible capability is inextricably linked to that 16-slot capacity. This is what creates the golden ratio configuration that makes the Crusader not just an option, but mandatory.
Yeah, this specific configuration is a meta staple, especially in the Gladius task force. It's known as the Aggressor Death Star.
Let's break down the components of that unit.
It's a unit of 6 aggressors in Gravis armor. Attached to them is a captain in Gravis armor, mainly for the free stratagem usage. And then the crucial third piece is an apothecary biologist, who gives the unit a lethal hits aura.
Okay, let's do the capacity math. Why is this specific combo so important?
It's pure synergy. Gravis models each take up 2 transport slots, so 6 aggressors is 12 slots.
Okay.
The captain of Gravis is another 2 slots, and the biologist is another 2 slots.
That's 16 slots, a perfect fit.
A perfect, precise fit. And you asked why it's so crucial. The aggressors themselves provide amazing output, both shooting and melee. But it's the biologist's lethal hits aura that acts as a massive force multiplier. The ability to guarantee that that aura gets applied exactly where you need it, thanks to the LRC's delivery service, is the whole strategic point.
And as we already established, the Redeemer with its 14 slots or the standard Land Raider with 12, they just can't carry that full optimized 16-slot unit.
Which makes the Crusader mandatory for this specific, highly potent build.
That really is the core competitive argument for it, then.
It is. The Crusader is inclusion-worthy only because it enables a meta-defining unit that cannot be enabled by any other heavy transport in the arsenal. If you're not running that specific 16-slot combination, you should absolutely be reevaluating why you're not taking the Redeemer instead.
And beyond the Aggressors, are there other key units that really benefit from this mobility solution?
We have to talk about Centurions. Both the Assault and Devastator variants are incredibly hard-hitting, very tough, but they suffer from an abysmal 4-inch movement characteristic.
They're basically walking turrets.
They are. And Centurions take up 3 slots per model. So a 5-man Assault Centurion squad is 15 squads. You attach a character for 1 slot, and you hit that 16-slot limit perfectly. The LRC is their lifeline. It completely solves their movement problem and lets that sluggish, high-damage unit hit the front line on turn 2 instead of turn 4.
Now let's pivot to a crucial tactical rule that a lot of players get wrong: the strategic reserves trap.
This is a mistake that loses games. It's very tempting to put a big target like the LRC in strategic reserves to protect it. However, the rules commentary is explicitly clear on this. If the Crusader arrives on the board via strategic reserves, the unit inside cannot declare a charge that turn.
So the LRC's primary value, its whole reason for being the assault ramp, is completely negated if you put it in reserves.
Precisely. The assault ramp lets you charge after the transport moves, but the unit itself is restricted because it just arrived from reserves. This means the Crusader functions optimally when it starts on the board, forcing your opponent to deal with its T12 profile from turn 1. It's a spearhead, not a flanking unit.
Let's talk about the practical logistics of moving this thing around, because this is something players often overlook. This tank is physically huge. It's about 7 inches long and 6 inches wide with the sponsons. The critique we saw mentioned the importance of something called the pivot tax.
Yes, this is a critical point that really separates veteran tank commanders from novices. On dense tournament terrain layouts like the WTC or official GW setups, the gaps between ruin walls are often exactly 6 inches wide or even less.
And the Crusader with its sponsons is wider than 6 inches.
So it's physically restricted. It cannot move through those ruin walls, and it can't squeeze through those narrow choke points without very careful planning.
It needs open lanes. And every time it has to maneuver around a piece of terrain, it's costing you movement.
That is the pivot tax. The 10th edition movement rules require you to measure the path of the part of the model that moves the furthest. So if you need to turn the Land Raider 90 degrees to face a target or to get around a corner, that rotation consumes a significant portion of your 12-inch movement allowance.
So a 12-inch move on paper might only be 8 or 9 inches of actual forward progress?
Very often, yes. You might find that your 12-inch move results in only 8 or 9 inches of effective linear progress towards your target. Imagine there's a gap between 2 ruins. The LRC approaches diagonally, but realizes it needs to turn 45 degrees to clear the far corner. It might use 3 inches of its movement just rotating that sponson around the terrain piece.
And that's a huge deal.
It's a massive deal. Commanders have to rigorously account for this lost movement, this pivot tax, when they're planning that crucial delivery turn. If you miscalculate and your aggressors end up 10 inches from the target instead of 7, the charge fails, and your entire 500-point investment is left stranded and exposed.
So running the LRC effectively requires a specific skill set. It's not just point and click.
Not at all.
Okay. We've established the LRC is cost-effective, durable, and a highly specialized logistical machine. Now we need to connect the chassis and the cargo to the bigger picture, the list-building ecosystem. This is synergy forensics, the detachment matrix. This is where the LRC's raw stats get polished into a real competitive weapon.
Before we jump into the main detachments, we have to revisit a small but really valuable piece of hidden utility, the grenades keyword.
Right. Why is this keyword on the Crusader specifically so useful?
Because, as we've established, the Crusader's actual shooting phase is pretty poor against elite targets. The grenades keyword unlocks the grenade stratagem for 1 CP. And this is invaluable because it provides a source of damage that is entirely independent of its low AP guns. It bypasses the armor problem completely.
And how reliable is that mortal wound output?
It's pretty good. You roll 6 dice, and for each 4+ MI, you do a mortal wound. So that gives you an average output of 3 mortal wounds.
3 mortals is nothing to sneeze at.
Not at all. If an enemy heavy infantry squad, or even a vehicle, has just 2 or 3 wounds left, and your main shooting phase failed to finish it off because of some bad dice rolls, A 1 CP grenade strat from the Crusader is statistically likely to finish the job. It turns the Crusader into an active and reliable participant in the finisher phase, which is huge, regardless of its poor gun stats.
Okay, now let's analyze its optimal competitive home. The sources point to the Ironstorm Spearhead Detachment as the place where the LRC truly shines.
Ironstorm is, without a doubt, its premier location. It fixes the Crusader's biggest mathematical weakness, that S4-S6 volume trap we talked about earlier.
How does it fix the strength flaw if the guns are still S4, S6, and S9?
It's through an enhancement called the Target Augury Web. You give this to a Tech Marine character, and if he's nearby, he grants the Crusader the crucial lethal hits keyword.
Lethal hit. So 6s to hit automatically wound, bypassing the strength versus toughness roll entirely. Okay, now, this is where the synergy math gets deadly. You now have 30 shots, 24 from the bolters, 6 from the cannon, all fishing for lethal hits against, say, an enemy T-12 vehicle. And you can spend CP to make it even better.
If you combine those lethal hits with the detachment's core stratagem, Mercy is Weakness, which grants sustained hits 1 and makes your critical hits happen on a 5+ instead of a 6+, the Crusader elevates itself from a chat sweeper to a credible medium-level threat.
Let's do that math. 30 shots, hitting on 3s, fishing for 5s.
You're going to auto-generate approximately 10 critical hits. That gives you 10 auto wounds from lethal hits, plus about 10 more hits from the sustained hits keyword.
So you're forcing 15 to 20 saves. That is a level of volume lethality that bypasses the strength issue completely.
It does. Against a T-12 target, forcing 20 saves is going to result in 3 or 4 damage getting through, which is exponentially better than the 0 or 1 damage it would do with its baseline profile. The attachment roll also gives you 1 free reroll per phase hit, wound, or damage, which makes your high variance, multi-melta, and hunter-killer missile suddenly reliable.
So the Ironstorm Crusader isn't just a bus. Its hull actually contributes viable threat saturation.
Which is why I would give it an A-tier rating within that specific list structure.
Okay, moving to its second powerful competitive home, Righteous Crusaders, the Black Templars' exclusive detachment. You called this its spiritual home, and you argue it provides the crucial structural fix it needs.
Yeah, this detachment offers the most direct solution to the LRC's Achilles heel, its lack of an invulnerable save.
How so?
Through the Uphold the Honor of the Emperor vow. Specifically, the 4th vow option grants the entire army a 6+ invulnerable save, a 6++ folk.
A 6++ doesn't sound like much, but it patches that critical vulnerability to high AP fire.
It makes all the difference in the world against AP4 or AP5 weaponry that would have previously just ignored your 2+ save completely. A T-12, 16 wound, 2+6++ Land Raider is incredibly tough to shift, and this is why we're seeing the emergence of a specific meta trend with Black Templars, the triple Land Raider list.
The triple Land Raider list. Okay, detail that strategy. It sounds like an overwhelming board presence.
It is a resource drain tactic. By running 3 Land Raider Crusaders, you present your opponent with 48 T-12 wounds on the board, all with a 6++ save, for a relatively low combined cost of 660 points.
That would just overwhelm a balanced list.
It does.
Yeah.
Most opponents bring enough anti-tank to maybe kill 1 or 2 vehicles efficiently. When they see 3 T-12 6++ holes rolling toward them, they're forced into a complete stat check failure. They can't possibly deal with all of them, so they have to decide which 16-slot bust they're just going to let through.
So the Black Templars list uses the LRC's cost efficiency to present an insurmountable durability wall.
That's the key. They're leveraging its cheapness to buy 3 hulls for what would normally be the price of 2 traditional heavy tanks.
Okay, next up, the Gladius Task Force, the standard generic Space Marine detachment. Is the Crusader still a solid choice here, even without all the vehicle-specific buffs?
It's a solid choice, yes, but purely because of that logistical capacity for the Aggressor Death Star. In Gladius, you're using the detachment's core stratagems to enhance its utility. The Storm of Fire stratagem is particularly key.
And that grants ignores cover and AP1. How does giving AP1 to the AP0 Hurricane Bolters actually help? That's the key connection.
It transforms them. Let's say you're shooting at enemy Marines hiding in cover. Normally, their save against your AP0 Bolters would be a 2+ cover.
Right, 3+ base +1 for cover.
But with Storm of Fire active, your AP1 reduces their save to a 4+ cover. Then, because they're in cover, they get +1, bringing their save back up to, wait, no, my math is off. Their 3+ save goes to a 4+ from the AP1. Cover doesn't stack if their save is already better. No, sorry, the stratagem ignores cover and AP1.
Oh, ignores cover and AP1.
My mistake, yes. So the enemy Marine in cover has a 3+ save. The AP1 from Storm of Fire pushes that to a 4+ save. And because the strat also gives you ignores cover, they don't get the +1 bonus to their save. So they are saving on a 4+ instead of 2+.
That's a huge degradation in their protection.
It is. It effectively doubles the damage output of the Hurricane Bolters against the kind of elite infantry targets the Crusader usually struggles with. It shifts the bolters from being useless to being genuinely threatening against an enemy screen.
And what about the utility from the doctrines?
That's also critical for its mobility. The tactical doctrine allows a Crusader to fall back and still shoot and charge. This is essential for preventing it from being tagged and disabled by cheap chaff units. An enemy unit charges you, you just fall back 12 inches next turn, fire your guns to clear them out, and then you can still use the assault ramp to deliver your cargo. It maintains that tactical flexibility.
Finally, we need to talk about the Firestorm Assault Force, which the outline labels the Trap. Why is a Land Raider Crusader suboptimal in this detachment?
Because the entire Firestorm detachment is built around buffing torrent weapons. The Redeemer's Flamestorm cannons are the absolute king of this detachment, because the detachment rule gives +1 strength to torrent weapons when you're within 12 inches.
And the Crusader has?
And no torrent weapons. None. Hurricane bolters are rapid fire. The assault cannon has devastating wounds. The Crusader gets absolutely zero benefit from the detachment's core, most powerful ability.
Are there any minor buffs?
The only minor buff is that your S4 Hurricane Bolters become S5 and your S9 Melta becomes S10, which helps a bit against T4 or T5 infantry, but does nothing significant against the T10 or T12 targets you really care about.
So if a commander takes a Crusader in Firestorm, it is purely for the logistical necessity of fitting that 16-slot aggressor unit, and they're sacrificing all of the tank's own potential buffs to do it.
Exactly. It's a mathematically inefficient choice for the tank itself. You are so much better off taking the Redeemer in that detachment, which leverages that +1 frank to make its Flamers S7. That lets it wound even T10 targets on 4s and makes its Overwatch exponentially more effective. The LRC is just a passenger in Firestorm, not a participant.
Okay, this has been an incredibly exhaustive analysis. Let's synthesize all these findings in our final section. Comparative analysis and meta verdict. We have to determine the competitive hierarchy here.
And the most common decision a Space Marine player has to make is this one: Crusader or Redeemer. We have to frame this decision purely on function, not on raw power.
Okay, let's summarize that core functional difference one more time.
The Redeemer costs you a 65-point premium, at 285 points, and you get 2 fewer slots. The Redeemer's primary function is Overwatch threat. Its Flamestorm cannons create this reactive, lethal, 12-inch no-go zone for enemy infantry.
And the Crusader's function is assault ramp delivery. It's a proactive 20+ inch threat range that bypasses the enemy screen.
That's the choice.
I want to challenge the idea that the Crusader is the better choice just because of the cost. I mean, the Redeemer's Overwatch can effectively kill an enemy unit before it even touches your battle line. It preserves your cargo and generates damage for you. Is that 16-slot capacity really worth losing that guaranteed threat saturation?
It is, but only if you have a specific plan for that delivery. The Redeemer is a generalist's choice. The Crusader is a specialist's tool. If that 16-slot aggressor configuration is mandatory for your list to function, or if the budget constraints are so tight that you need that 65 points to fit in an extra scoring unit, then you take the Crusader.
But if you need passive board control, guaranteed damage, and high AP output,
then you take the Redeemer. The difference in cost, coupled with that unique capacity, is the sole justification for the Crusader's existence.
Now let's compare it to the more modern alternative, the flying chassis, the Repulsor. It's cheaper, around 190 points, and it's also T12 with 16 wounds. So why is the Crusader still often seen as more durable?
It comes back to the save value. The Crusader has a base 2+ save, the Repulsor has a base 3+ save. And that single point of difference is magnified exponentially against high AP weapons.
Right, our EHP calculation.
As we calculated, the 2+ save, when you combine it with cover and AOC, gives you an effective health pool of 48 against common anti-tank. The Repulsor's 3+ save degrades way too easily into a 6+, or even no save at all under the same fire. It makes the Crusader far, far stickier on a points-per-wound basis against the meta's deadliest guns.
And their utility abilities are almost a mirror image of each other.
They are. The Repulsor has emergency embarkation, which lets a unit get back inside if the transport is charged. That's fantastic for protecting your shooting cargo like Hellblasters or Eradicators.
While the Crusader has the assault ramp,
which is designed exclusively for melee units like Aggressors or Blade Guard who need to charge out. You cannot charge out of a repulsor after it moves, which makes the LRC mandatory for melee delivery.
And this very specific, detailed niche is why the LRC's viability skyrocketed when that 65-point gap opened up and the Crusader dropped to 220 points. It created a true competitive purpose for it.
Yeah, and it's even emerged as a crucial counter-meta pick against certain armies, especially those that rely heavily on invulnerable saves, like Custodes or some Demon lists.
Why does the Crusader specifically counter Custodes?
Because the Redeemer's high AP2 flamers are often completely wasted against the Custodes' ubiquitous 4++ invulnerable saves.
Right, they just save it all anyway.
The LRC's strategy using volume of fire in a detachment like Ironstorm, and more importantly, its primary function as a transport, favors getting your own melee beatsticks, like Aggressors, into combat with them. Once they're in combat, those Aggressors can leverage their sustained output to force through a massive number of saves and bypass the invulnerable save problem, rather than the tank itself trying to shoot at a 4++ save.
Okay, let's finalize the rule reality. What should the listener write down on their notepad as the Land Raider Crusader's actual competitive mission profile?
Okay, primary role, high-capacity assault transport. Secondary role, economic stat check and move blocker, not a role, tank hunter or generalist firebase. Its guns are purely for enabling the charge phase for its contents.
And the final, synthesized verdict on its competitive rating.
It's a B+, context dependent. It is not an auto-include. You can't just slot it into any list and expect it to work. But at 220 points, it is remarkably efficient and provides a logistical capability, that 16-slot assault ramp delivery that is mandatory for running one of the most powerful elite units in the entire game. It is truly the thinking player's transport.
And that brings us to the end of our deep dive. I think we successfully shifted the perception of the Land Raider Crusader from that glorious but fictional, lore-based linebreaker to a cold, data-driven logistician's choice.
I think so. We've confirmed its true value isn't in its low AP bolters. It's in the combination of the assault ramp and the 16-slot capacity, which makes it absolutely essential for specific, powerful list builds, especially when you bolster it with a specialized detachment like Ironstorm Spearhead, or you give the durability fix from the Black Templars.
So the final recommendation for you, the learner, is crystal clear. Only include the Land Raider Crusader in your list if you are running that specific 6 Aggressor plus character configuration, or if you desperately need a cheap, durable T12 hull to anchor a vehicle-focused list and draw fire away from your true threats.
If you're just looking for a strong generalist gun platform or a reliable Overwatch piece, the Redeemer is still the superior choice. Treat the Crusader as a specialist tool, and you will find competitive success with it.
And this leaves us with our final provocative thought for you to chew on during your next list building session. We've analyzed the LRC based on its economy, its durability, and its firepower, and we ultimately concluded it's a delivery vehicle.
But given that the LRC excels at clearing screens, delivering an unstoppable melee threat 24 inches up the board, and absorbing heavy fire that would kill more expensive tanks, does its ultimate strategic success change the very definition of what a linebreaker is in 10th edition?
That's a great question. Is a line truly broken by the tank's underwhelming guns? Or is the line actually broken by the unstoppable 300-plus point unit that it successfully delivers to the very core of the enemy's army?
If the Crusader ensures that your specialized melee elite reach the objective and shatter the enemy's plan, has it not performed the ultimate line-breaking action, regardless of its own low-damage output?
That's the question of strategic purpose we'll leave you to mull over.
That is the ultimate competitive value proposition of the Land Raider Crusader.
We'll leave you to the math. Until next time, stay well informed, and may your critical hits be plentiful.